you the name of the U.S. citizen that appeared in the New York Times and Washington Post?
I can't say in this forum because, again, I don't want to confirm that there was classified information in the newspaper.
Would he have access to an unmasked name?
In some circumstances, sure.
Would Director Brennan have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
In some circumstances, yes.
Would former White House advisor Ben Rhodes have access to an unmasked U.S. citizen's name?
I don't know the answer to that.
Could you find out? South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy is joining us right now from Washington. He's a member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which is why he got in the door with his special pass and was able to ask those questions. Congressman, why were you running down those lists of Obama officials?
Well, I started, Brian, with the NSA and the testimony was there were 20 folks there. And in a previous conversation with Director Comey, not yesterday, we identified the universe of people at the FBI. So I'm trying to find that discrete universe of people who had access to the name. You and I are not on that list. So that will save the FBI the trouble of coming and interviewing you and interviewing me. But I'm trying to help the public and Director Comey kind of narrow down the universe of people who would have had access to the information to then leak it.
When he came out and made his initial, after you guys made your speeches, after Devin Nunes came out and Congressman Schiff came out and made their opening remarks, he was asked, you know, why, basically, what are your remarks? I want to confirm that there's an investigation going on to the role of Russia in the last election and any type of relationship with the Trump organization. Was that new news to you?
It was not. It should not have been new news to anyone on House Intel. Again, the beauty of Intel is we do our work behind closed doors, and you have access to information that perhaps other members don't have. You just can't talk about it. So that was not a surprise to me.
So what did we learn from yesterday? What did Trey Gowdy, the prosecutor, learn from yesterday?
I learned it's really tough to run serious quasi-criminal or criminal investigations in a public setting, which is why it's never done, except in Washington. I think the most troubling part for me was when Director Comey would not assure us that there's a leak investigation. He was more than happy to assure us that there's an investigation into the potential ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, which may or may not be a crime. Leaking of classified information is a crime, but he would not confirm that investigation.
Would you also, are you surprised that there's no interest in John Podesta's perhaps investment in a company that Vladimir Putin was invested in that was turned over to his daughter? I think John Podesta played a major role.
You know, I don't know, and I'm not supposed to know, and I hope the FBI is working on lots and lots of things involved in this fact pattern that no one knows about, because that's a sign to me of the integrity of the investigation. But I have no idea what Director Comey knows and what the women and men of the FBI are working on.
What about the fact that Roger Stone and some others, Paul Manafort and others, were somehow in contact with Russians? And they might deny it, but in Roger Stone's case, he direct tweeted Guccifer. He was praising Julian Assange. Is that what do you think? What role do you think they played with Trump? What role do you think they played in this entire thing, from what you can tell us?
Don't know, and won't be able to answer that question until the Bureau interviews the names you just mentioned. There are times in life where people claim to have a connection or a nexus with folks, and that is not borne out factually. You will never hear me compliment Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. And I'm disappointed in anyone who does. But the FBI has access to far more information even than House Intel, and they're pursuing an investigation. And what I told him at the end yesterday, Brian, is there's a vacuum right now. And politicians will fill that vacuum. So the sooner you conclude your investigation, the better it is for the American people.
And finally, I know I'm up against a hard break and you have to run, but when do you think this will be done from your professional standpoint after we saw prior investigations? We've got a month, weeks?
You know, yesterday I commented to Chairman Nunes that it only took 8 days to go through all of Secretary Clinton's emails between the first letter and the second letter. I hope, and I'm sure Director Comey knows the gravity of this investigation from a constitutional perspective, and I'm sure they will do it as quickly as possible, but it depends upon the evidence and the number of witnesses and the number of documents.
Somehow, if there's a big story in Washington, Congressman Trey Gowdy's in the middle of it. So thanks so much for joining us.
Yes,
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
For weeks, President Trump has been ridiculed for his claim that the Obama administration may have monitored his communications, and he still hasn't provided proof of that. But today, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes revealed that there is evidence, some supporting the president's claim. Watch this.
What I've read seems to me to be some level of surveillance activity, perhaps legal, but I don't know that it's right, and I don't know that the American people would be comfortable with what I've read. But let us get all the reports and at any time.
The president was correct in what he tweeted?
It is possible.
Well, President Trump reacted this way.
Do you feel vindicated by Chairman Nunes coming over here?
I somewhat do. I must tell you, I somewhat do. I very much appreciated the fact that they found what they found, but I somewhat do.
So this is a genuinely interesting development. We called more than 30 members of Congress from both parties who have mocked the president's claim he was surveilled. None of them agreed to come on. So instead, we're joined by someone brave, Jessica Tarloff. She's a Democratic strategist and senior director at bustle.com. Jessica, good to see you.
Nice to see you, too. That's like best intro ever.
So, I mean, look, I was frustrated by the president's tweet. I said it right to him in an interview last week. I thought it was imprecise. I still think that. But I think underlying all of this is a really big issue that we're ignoring, we being the press, because the press hates Trump. And that is that the U.S. government may have, in effect, misused the power of its intelligence agencies for political purposes. We're not sure of that. But it's a little bit weird that one administration would be surveilling a candidate and or his staff during a presidential race on the other side. Doesn't that sort of give you pause?
Well, that's not what I understood happened today, actually, or what Congressman Nunes was saying. What I understood he was saying is that there may have been legal surveillance of foreign actors that then incidentally picked up activity within Trump Tower. So I think the real issue is here, why were we surveilling people that people within Trump Tower were speaking to, and the fact that the president's claim is still, as far as we know, completely inaccurate and without foundation. That's what I took away from today.
So those are two separate things. But let's go to the first one first. Now, I think there's evidence that these investigations were initiated by the Obama administration because they believed there were untoward ties between the Trump administration and foreign actors, A. B, we know from the chairman's remarks today that those names in the documents, in the readouts of the conversations that were wiretapped, in effect, were not redacted, which contravenes policy. You're not supposed to leave the names open and have them floating around government systems.
Absolutely.
And yet they did leave the names unmasked, as they say, which seems a major violation.
It does, and I've had this conversation before, and I do think it's important to address that issue, that those names are protected when they are supposed to be. But at the same time, I don't know why, well, actually, I do know why Republicans want to focus on that and not the fact that Donald Trump made this claim without anything to back it up. And we even have a breaking news report this evening that it looks like the FBI does have evidence that there was collusion between Trump campaign members and Russian operatives in order to damage Hillary Clinton. And we'll see where that continues to go. But it's very odd.
I don't know that we have that. I think what we have is one of the Democrats on the committee suggesting that there's evidence. And look, I'm open-minded about that. But here's the point. The idea that one administration might be using the massive intelligence gathering of the United States government for political purposes is a terrifying prospect. And we've seen it before. We saw it with Governor Eliot Spitzer of New York. And I'm sorry to defend Eliot Spitzer because I know everyone doesn't like him and he's a liberal and I'm not. But he was put under surveillance by the feds for the crime of adding money to his own bank account. And because he got caught up in the hooker scandal, nobody seemed to care, but it was a big deal. We saw General David Petraeus, whose life was destroyed because they broke into his Gmail account. Because why? So this power has been misused again and again, but it's been misused against people who are not popular in the press, so nobody says anything about it. But we should care. Why don't we care?
Absolutely should care, and I just would like this to be separate conversations. I mean, I'm happy for us to talk about all of them, but one doesn't, equate to the other necessarily, and we can treat them as separate entities. There's precedent for the misuse of this information. That's the only point I'm making. We've seen this before. It does happen, and you're not some sort of kooky flat earther for believing the government can hurt its own citizens with these spying powers, because it has. No, I understand that, and again, I'm happy to have that conversation, but it doesn't make it all right that Donald Trump made this accusation that the former president of the United States of America was wiretapping him when we've seen no evidence of it. That's the issue here. And also,
hold on. Didn't we just see some today? We just saw.
Why?
We saw the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee say yes.
What did he show you? He said that maybe he has something that he thinks was legal. And also, why did he not go to his committee members first? Why did he go to the White House first and then to the press?
That's an entirely fair question, but it ignores the root of it all, which is it did happen, apparently. Whether or not it's legal is foregone. Everything is legal. The government can do whatever it wants. Its spying powers are unlimited, and by the way, it can be unilaterally ordered by the President of the United States. That's legal, too. I'm not saying it happened here. I'm just saying it's all legal. The question is, should you be doing it? And he basically confirmed that intel agencies controlled by the Obama administration were spying, maybe unintentionally, maybe not, on Trump staffers, like recently. That's what Trump said, in effect.
Well, no,
but
not
still.
in effect. We've gone through so many iterations of what Donald Trump said. He's put things now in quotation marks. We've heard about microwave spying. We have to go back to the original tweet, which is not at all what happened. And we've heard from Director Comey. We've heard from the head of the NSA. We've heard from Nunes himself, Adam Schiff, Richard Burr. Everyone has said that the original claim that he made is unfounded. Now, if
Wait, but doesn't what Nunes said today, I mean, how does that not back it up? He said, look, there were people, maybe it wasn't Trump himself.
But
he
that's what
suggested
Donald
it.
Trump said.
No, look, again, I have criticized the president to his face for being imprecise.
I liked
but
it.
there is something important here for the third time, which is the spying powers of the U.S. government seem like they may have been misused by the Obama people. Liberals should be really worried about that, because if it can be done to Trump and people you don't like, it can be done to people you do like, and
Absolutely. Well, we know about spying. We know what happened during the campaign, and we know what WikiLeaks has done, and it exposed tons of DNC emails, and we know all about, you know, John Podesta's cooking and all of that stuff. So
but the
absolutely.
U.S. government doing it to its own citizens for
terrible.
political reasons, there's nothing scary. That's third world, no?
It is absolutely frightening. It's things that go on in places like Russia, things that go on in places like China, and that's disturbing. I'm just saying that there are many conversations going on here, and I feel like Republicans only want to have that conversation when there's an important other one to be had about the claims that the President of the United States of America has made about the former President of the United States of America, seemingly unfounded. And he's out there tonight retweeting Gateway Pundit and Bill Mitchell, who says, oh, Donald Trump is always right.
But you don't need to retweet websites. You could just repeat what the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee said. Maybe he's lying.
Maybe.
But if he's
Why
not
didn't
lying,
he show his
it
own
seems to
committee
me,
the information then?
I
mean, it's a little
he
freaky.
will, but if this is true, this is a bigger scandal than anything that's being alleged about Russia, is it not?
I think that those are two enormous scandals if they both play out. If we find out that the Trump administration or the future Trump administration colluded with Russia to influence the election, that is massive. If we find out that the Obama administration was wiretapping Donald Trump through his phone or his microwave, that is also massive.
We're a lot closer to one than the other, but I'll invite you back when we find out for sure. Jesse Tarloff, thanks for...
Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes made the bombshell announcement confirming what President Trump has been now saying for weeks, that in fact surveillance was collected on members of his team, including himself. Joining us now with reaction from Circa News is Sarah Carter. With all the breaking news tonight, Sarah, this would have been my lead on any other night. This is what you have been telling this audience for over 2 weeks straight now, and corroborates and confirms everything you and John Solomon reported. I want your full reaction and anything you want to add to this.
Well, I think it is hugely significant. You know, my reaction to this is, look, these sources approached Chairman Nunes. They had information, classified information, that revealed what we had been reporting all along. And obviously, that's information that I, as a reporter, can't accept or take from sources. You know, we have been told this. That's why we were out here telling the audience every day for the last 2 weeks. This goes far beyond what the scope of what everybody is reporting out there. One of the things, unmasking of the names, going beyond Russia. So what Chairman Nunes was able to show was that it wasn't just about Russia. They were getting transcripts with unmasked names of people within the Trump team that were not about Russia at all. So we need to ask two questions, very important questions, Sean. Who were on those logs that viewed these reports, and who approved it? Those are the two most important questions.
I say it a little differently, maybe to be a little more incendiary, because that's my nature. Who knew what when, and what did they know, and when did they know it? These questions now must be answered. This is so unprecedented. You talk about unmasked. Those names are that revelation in the course of regular surveillance is supposed to be as regular order. It is supposed to be hidden. And then it delves into Executive Order 12333. Why did Obama change it to allow 16 other agencies to have access to it? Was that designed to purposefully leak this information? There's so many unanswered questions. Where do you think this goes? That's my most important question.
Okay, I think this goes the next step. We need to know what, to some extent, what were the other documents that were viewed by the personnel inside the intelligence community. And remember, Sean, this is a very narrow scope of people that can approve the unmasking of names, and that needs to be revealed as well. And I think Chairman Nunes is onto something here. I know we're onto something here. This is something that we're looking into. We've been investigating diligently, and hopefully we can break it on your show.
You'll be on the program tomorrow. He said he was bothered by one other thing. Now we have James Clapper, Admiral Rogers, and James Comey saying no votes were influenced at all. So this whole Russian narrative by a biased media has been wrong for all of these months. This is deep and profound and very problematic. We have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think this goes far beyond what the American people actually realize. This is about right to privacy. This goes far beyond the scope of the FISA, and this wasn't what the government said it was intended for, and it's very, very dangerous. It's dangerous to the Republic. It's dangerous to us as private citizens, and I think this investigation is going to continue, and I actually believe someone's going to pay the price for this.
I believe somebody could be very high-ranking within the intelligence community, and it may go to Obama administration's officials. Am I onto something in your opinion based on what you know now, yes or no?
Yes.
Wow. We'll have you back tomorrow night. Chairman Nunes tomorrow night. When we come back, more Hannity right after this break. All right, thanks so much, Tucker. And this is a Fox News alert. Tonight, President Trump just wrapped up his rally in Louisville, Kentucky. Kellyanne Conway, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, will join us in just a few minutes. But first, here are some of the highlights of that speech.
Thursday is our chance to end Obamacare and the Obamacare catastrophe and begin delivering the reforms our people deserve. I am confident that if we empower the American people, we will accomplish incredible things for our country, not just on health care, but all across our government. Our struggling industries are going to be revitalized, and our dying factories will come roaring back to life.
Also tonight, FBI Director James Comey, he testified before the House Intelligence Committee. That was earlier today. Democrats, the alt-left, propaganda, destroy Trump media, continue to ignore facts and what has clearly now become a political witch hunt. And that is tonight's opening monologue. All right, so after 8 long months of pushing conspiracy theories one after another, well, liberals still refuse to accept a simple truth. There's not one shred of evidence, none, showing collusion between President Trump and the Russians. None, zero zip. Now, instead, the only thing that they can focus on is the FBI director saying that he has not seen evidence to support President Trump's tweets about wiretapping. Now, here's the same hypocritical media that used the words wiretapping in their own reporting. Remember this headline from the New York Times, January 20th? Quote, wiretap data used in inquiry of Trump aides. Oh. The New York Times, are they going to apologize? Now, while the Democrats feign moral outrage, they are missing the real scandal here. Laws, in fact, were broken. Starting back in January, we have seen the repeated leaking of classified information meant to inflict damage on President Trump and his entire administration. Now, every one of these are criminal acts, felonies that are being committed. That does not seem to bother the Democrats in any way, shape, manner, or form. And the intelligence community, well, they don't seem to have an answer as to why it's happening and how they're going to stop it from continuing. Take a look at this back and forth between Congressman Trey Gowdy and the FBI Director Comey about these leaks. Watch this.
I thought it was against the law to disseminate classified information. Is it?
Oh, yes, sure. It's a serious crime.
Is there an exception in the law for current or former U.S. officials who request anonymity?
To release classified information?
Yes, sir.
No.
Comey admitted it is illegal to leak classified intelligence. So why hasn't he found the person or the people responsible? And why, after all these months, can't the FBI give us an answer? Now, Trey Gowdy also asked specifically if there was an investigation into General Flynn's case. That was a felony for sure. Watch this.
We're a month and a half or 2 months into something that you and I agree is incredibly important and also happens to be a felony. So I'm just simply asking you to assure the American people, you've already assured them you take it really seriously, can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified information, but I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it. And I'm sorry I have to draw that line. I just think that's the right way to be.
Oh, the right way to be? The FBI doesn't comment on potential ongoing investigations? Well, the problem is today, Comey, well, he commented on an ongoing investigation into potential Russian influence in the election. Now, the FBI director cannot have it both ways here. Now, right now, there are so many questions, no definitive answers, and it has allowed the alt-radical, destroy Trump media to run wild with paranoid conspiracies. The only crime we know for a fact that was committed, the only one, was the leaking of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's name to the media. House Intel Committee Chair Devin Nunes, he said this exact thing earlier today. Take a look.
Do we believe there was any specific, well, do we know of anybody else other than Mike Flynn who was swept up in this?
Well, you're right to point that out, because the one crime we know that's been committed is that one. The leaking of someone's name through the FISA system. That is a crime that's been committed.
Felony up to 5 years in jail, maybe longer. Now, Senator Rand Paul's also speaking out about the law being broken in the case of Lieutenant General Flynn. Here's what he said.
I think that we know one thing for sure, that the Obama administration did spy on Flynn. Now, whether it was direct or indirect, somebody was reading and taking a transcript of his phone calls, and then they released it. It is very, very important that whoever released that go to jail, because you cannot have members of the intelligence community listening to the most private and highly classified information and then releasing that to the New York Times.
Now, aside from the political stunts and the feigned moral outrage and selective moral outrage from the Democrats at today's hearing, what else did we learn? Well, pretty much what Circa News reporters Sarah Carter and John Solomon have been telling us for the past 2 weeks right here on this show. That's right, that national security and intelligence agencies have, in fact, been investigating Russian attempts to influence the election. This is not new. We've been talking about it for 2 straight weeks. As Obama's own director of national intelligence, James Clapper, said, Russian meddling didn't have an impact on vote tallies. Watch this.
First, we cannot say they did not change any vote tallies or anything of that sort.
Yeah, I'm just talking
we have
about,
we have no way of gauging the impact that certainly the intelligence community can't gauge the impact it had on choices the electorate made.
No impact on vote tallies. Also today, the FBI director and Admiral Rogers testifying both said that Russia did not influence the vote tallies in key swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Florida. This is them today.
Do you have any evidence that Russia cyber actors changed vote tallies in the state of Michigan?
No, I do not, but I would highlight we're a foreign intelligence organization, not a domestic intelligence organization. So it would be fair to say we are probably not the best organization to provide a more complete answer.
How about the state of Pennsylvania?
No, sir.
The state of Wisconsin?
No, sir.
State of Florida?
No, sir.
The state of North Carolina?
No, sir.
The state of Ohio?
No, sir.
So you have no intelligence that suggests or evidence that suggests any votes were changed?
I have nothing generated by the National Security Agency, sir.
Director Comey, do you have any evidence at the FBI that any votes were changed in the states that I mentioned to Admiral Rogers?
No.
No, none. Comey also noted that, in fact, it's happened before, and Russia will try to interfere in the 2020 election. And by the way, if you read the tea leaves here, the investigation seems to now be focused on specific individuals. And let me emphasize, not President Trump. Now, of course, the Democrats, they didn't mention that today. Instead, they're pushing the false Russian narrative lie. Watch this.
Most important, we do not yet know whether the Russians had the help of U.S. citizens, including people associated with the Trump campaign. Many of the Trump's campaign personnel, including the president himself, have ties to Russia and Russian interests.
This committee, of course, is engaged in an investigation about links, as you said, between the Trump campaign and the Russians, should there be any possible collusion.
Can you say with any specificity what kind of coordination or contacts you're looking at in your investigation generally?
All right, so if influencing elections of foreign countries is so awful, so horrible, Where were all of these Democrats back when President Obama was trying to influence the Israeli elections? Now, let me remind every one of you hypocrites in Congress and all you liberal snowflakes out there that, in fact, a congressional investigation found that back in 2014, an Israeli political group used 300,000+ taxpayer dollars from the Obama State Department in a grant to create a political apparatus to try and defeat our closest ally in the Middle East, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. What a bunch of hypocrites. Here with reaction, Circa News investigative reporter Sarah Carter. All right. The first thing I got out of this, I said, you go, Sarah, you go, John, because everything you've been telling our audience for 2 weeks was validated today. Let's start there.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we talked about the fact that the FBI had conducted a traditional investigation into Trump's server that was located outside of Trump Tower, and that they found no evidence of criminality at all in the server, the pings that were reported between his server and the Russian bank. We also talked about the FISA and that there was an overall investigation into Russian hacking. This proved out to be true. And I want to bring up something that you just talked about, Sean, that's so important. There's also no evidence, according to our sources, of any collusion between Trump or his team and Russia and the Russian hacking. So we've seen that from Senator Grassley. We've seen it from Chairman Nunes. We've heard it from Clapper. We've heard it from numerous other sources, people who support Hillary Clinton, like former acting CIA acting director Mike Morrell, who all have said there is no evidence to date to support that. But that was one of the things that was not answered at the hearing.
You know, and the Destroy Trump media is very interesting how they spun this thing today. The FBI wouldn't confirm that the tweet of Donald Trump about wiretapping by the Obama administration. Interesting. Wiretapping and surveillance technically are two different things, but I would argue we may be parsing words. Nobody asked if the Trump server at any point was surveilled. The Trump Tower server was surveilled at any point by any law enforcement, and whether or not James Comey knew it. Wouldn't that be the better question to have asked?
Yeah, I think that would have been the better question to have asked. And it goes way beyond that. Okay, physical wiretapping of Trump Tower. Okay, that's what they've said. That's the evidence. Even Nunes came out and said, okay, there is no evidence of physical wiretapping at Trump Tower. But remember, Chairman Nunes' conversation with the Russian ambassador, and that leaked. Was that the only name? Are there more names out there? How many people saw unredacted transcripts of phone conversations between Trump and his associates and foreign leaders? Because remember what the FISA covers, Sean.
Right.
It covers the foreign leaders. So anytime President Trump, back then candidate Trump, made a phone call to a foreign leader or spoke to them, was that viewed by others? I mean, that's something that Chairman Nunes and others want to know.
What's sad is that the director of the FBI, who doesn't comment on ongoing investigations, well, he commented on an investigation that you've been reporting on for 2 weeks. That, in fact, there were 2 warrants issued. One was FISA, one was non-FISA. And it was not against Trump, but it was into the Russian influencing or attempt to influence of the election. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. In an ancillary area, when it did, they looked into the Trump server. They found nothing. He didn't say that today. Why? And how important is that for the public to know?
Well, he's very limited on what he can say because the DOJ gives him those parameters, right? The Department of Justice says these are the parameters in which you can disclose this information. And maybe because the report isn't closed yet, the investigation is still ongoing, he didn't answer those questions. What we do know, and I've contacted the DOJ, I asked them, is there an investigation into the leak? Have you given permission for the FBI to investigate that leak? They would not answer me either way. But we do know from the sources we've been speaking to.
Why are they selective in what investigations they're willing to comment on when they don't comment on investigations?
Exactly. I mean, that's a very good point, and they won't answer that. But what we do know is, according to our sources at the FBI and on the Hill, they have not been given that permission
yet. Last question. The real story is seeming to move in a political direction. Where are we in terms of that?
Well, we are continuing to investigate that. I mean, I think the biggest question here is, was intelligence politicized? How was it politicized? And when we're looking at the FISA, what are our rights?
Is it possible top intelligence people, Trey Gowdy went through the list of people that would have had access to this information, especially after Executive Order 12333 was expanded to 16 other agencies, naming specific names. Now, Trey Gowdy's never lost a case as a prosecutor. I assume he was setting the table for future investigations and questions that would directly relate to who knew what when.
Yeah.
Of the names that he listed, true or false?
He mentioned, true. I mean, he mentioned Susan Rice. He mentioned Ben Rhodes. He mentioned Director Brennan. I mean, there is a list of people.
And there could be a
and
top
small
intelligence leak, and that is the issue, and that's the felony we know that was committed, right?
That's correct. That is correct. But whether it's investigated, we just don't know if it's going to go that far.
All right, great work, Sarah. We'll continue. We've been way ahead of the curve. We've been telling people for 2 weeks. They're not listening yet. Thanks for being with us. And up next, this is a Fox News alert. Air Force One has just arrived at Joint Base Andrews. President Trump is traveling back from his rally in Kentucky. Joining us now with more, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. I want to stay on this issue and how wrong the media has it in so many different ways. We've been reporting everything with John Solomon and Sarah Carter for 2 weeks. You heard my opening monologue. What is your reaction to it?
I thought today showed the best contrast of all, Sean. You have an 8-month-long investigation on Russia with nothing to show for it, and Donald Trump in office for just 2 months with so much to show for it. He just had his rally in Louisville, Kentucky, promising to make good on uprooting and repealing and replacing the most intrusive, invasive, expensive, and expansive law entitlement that we've had in generations. And he's making good on that promise just this week by negotiating, by listening, by improving and making progress on the bill with leaders in the House and the Senate, and of course our governors who control the Medicaid dollars. And so I think the contrast is really remarkable. I love the way President Trump defied all the negative noise inside the Beltway by going to Kentucky and putting a very positive, optimistic message out there for all to see. The positive, optimistic message that he delivered in Louisville tonight really matches the markets, the stock market, the consumer confidence, a 12-year high in confidence among home builders, according to a report last week. And so he matches a lot of the mood of this country that's not being reflected, that's not being covered, because it's negative, negative, negative. But look, I mean, the unmasking of an American citizen through these intelligence leaks should concern everyone. I think we learned about that today. And, you know, again, I would just repeat, we've had 8 months, and I'm not sure that we've advanced the ball at all.
I know he had a really good meeting, and he was able to win over through some of the changes he negotiated with the Republican Study Committee. I spoke earlier tonight to some of the members of the Freedom Caucus. They're not there yet. They would have enough votes to stop it in the House. Senator Paul, a few other senators on their side, they want more changes. The president wants a vote by Thursday, or Paul Ryan, who we'll talk to in a minute, wants a vote by Thursday. You convinced that'll get done?
Yes, the president and vice president have really leaned in on this, and they're confident that we'll get the votes. And as you just intimated, some changes have been made to the legislation. That's
even
what
tonight,
leaders do. That's right. They listen, they negotiate, they find out what's in the best interest of everyone and what's possible. And some things can change, some things can't, frankly. But you know, the president made a really good point tonight in his rally in Louisville, Sean. He talked about this Thursday getting the health care repeal and replacement done, getting that vote in the House. And then he said we're going to move on to taxes soon, and then we're going to tackle drug pricing. And the president's own words tonight were, some people say getting the cost of drugs down and medicines is just as important as tackling health care altogether, because this is really something we hear from people all over the country. It's just damaging the everyday affordability of life, and it's why people found that the original Affordable Care Act was neither affordable nor sustainable.
The two solutions that make the most sense to me are, number one, medical savings accounts, which I've advocated for years, and the second, I keep putting this guy from Wichita, Kansas on radio and TV. His name is Dr. Josh Unger, Atlas MD, $50 a month per adult, unlimited care, concierge care, $10 a month for a child. He negotiates directly with the pharmaceuticals, 95% discount, literally a 98% discount for x-rays, MRIs, every procedure, broken leg, stitches, all taken care of. Add a catastrophic plan, semi-high deductible, and you're fully covered. God forbid you get cancer, heart attack, or a bad accident. It's so simple in so many ways. Is that all going to be in this bill by Thursday? That's what I want to know.
The president, as a non-politician who appreciates free market solutions, private solutions, listens to accounts like that. And that's the whole point here, is that when you have top-down government-run health care that people are forced to purchase on or pay a penalty, attacks essentially, you don't even listen to examples like the one you just related and relate regularly to your audience. There are so many great best practices out there in the free market, and this president is somebody who's listening to that and putting it in there. But we feel confident. I was up on Capitol Hill tonight with our Director of Legislative Affairs, Mark Short. We met with members of the Republican conference. Folks are on Capitol Hill constantly. People are over to the White House, as you know. They're working the phone. So this is a very collaborative process, and it's one that I think you really see the leadership of the president and the vice president, where they did not delegate or abdicate the details to anyone else. They've been fully involved, and along with Speaker Ryan and of course Leader McConnell and the leadership in both chambers.
I got to tell you, and Dr. Umber, in his case, he was able to duplicate this in 1,000 other practices around the country, and there's so many new paradigms that'll emerge. It'll be fascinating to see that change for the better for people that now can afford health care and have a better plan, and competition will do that. Kellyanne, we love having you. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Sean.
Bye.
All the best.
Paul Ryan is with us. Mr. Speaker, always good to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Thanks for having me, Sean. Good to be with you.
So you want to vote, we expect to vote Thursday on the health care bill, and I saw progress, a lot of progress on Friday. Let's start with the good news. And for example, the White House, for example, the option to impose work requirements on Medicaid recipients, block grant Medicaid. I know that was important to the Freedom Caucus members. And also the measure, which I think is interesting, is that the White House and House leaders are also increasing the tax credits. Some people don't like that aspect of it. Where do you stand now? Do you think you have the votes right now to pass this bill?
Yeah, I feel very good, because what we've been doing this entire process, Sean, has been listening to our members, finding out where the consensus is, and making improvements to the bill as we've gone through the legislative process. As you know, it's a 4-committee process. In the Budget Committee, there was an effort to say, let's look at work requirements. Let's look at even more federalism for Medicaid, something very important to conservatives. There already is a per capita block grant, but some governors were saying, let me just take the whole thing in a block grant. And that's what a lot of conservatives were asking for as well. And that's something we figured out we could get this bill to do. We always had to make sure that every change we make conforms to the Senate rules, which we have to play by, to make sure that it can't get filibustered. And so that's what we've been doing. So all these changes that have been added, we're doing to make sure they're done in such a way that it can't get filibustered. We feel really good where we are. So a lot of members have brought a lot of good ideas to the table. And you mentioned the last one. That's something that's also important to the president. The president has said, let's see if we can add to the people who are getting assistance, who don't get health care from their job, who are older, maybe in their 50s or their 60s, to make sure that they're in a good place as well. So we're doing even more assistance there, more federalism, work requirements for Medicaid, for able-bodied people. So these are the kinds of things that get Republicans in a good place. We feel very good. Our members have been working really hard at this, and we realize that this is coming to the point. The president's going to do something in Kentucky tonight. He's coming to talk to us tomorrow morning to give sort of a rally to our members to get this done, because you know what? We all promised this. We all said we would repeal and replace Obamacare if you give us a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate. Well, we have that now, and we're working very closely with the administration. I got to tell you, Sean, I'm really, really impressed with the president himself, rolling up his sleeves, getting involved, listening to members, brokering compromises, getting us on the same page, and getting to this place. So I feel very good at where we are, and we're going to move this to the House and then go take it on over in the Senate.
Why is so much emphasis put on the CBO? They said Obamacare would have 24 million enrolled people. They have 11. I mean, it almost seems like an effort in futility to keep going back to them when they're so wrong so often.
It's all about the filibuster, Sean. It's all about the way that the Senate law works with the Budget Act, which says the score, as scored by the CBO, must meet what we call reconciliation instructions. And so to conform with the Senate rules, to be able to reconcile this bill and block a Chuck Schumer filibuster, you got to have a CBO score. That's how it works, and those are the rules we're playing by. Those are the rules that they are.
All right, let me then move on. You saw the hearings today with James Comey. To me, the big news that came out of this is both Comey and Admiral Rogers both confirmed what James Clapper had said, and that is, okay, there's no evidence that any votes were altered or shifted or changed in any of the swing states that mattered in this election. The media is not focused on that. But we had reporters on this program, John Solomon and Sarah Carter. They're both saying, in fact, there was surveillance of the server at Trump Tower. There was a FISA warrant about the overall Russian investigation, not about Trump. And while he's willing to admit one investigation is going on, he's not willing to admit another in terms of leaking. He says, well, it's common practice. We don't acknowledge that. Is that troubling to you?
Well, look, that's why we have an Intelligence Committee investigation. So the point is, the president asked for this, and we already had an Intelligence Committee investigation going on before all of this. And so that's why I think Chairman Nunes and his ranking member and Chairman Burr over in the Senate and his ranking member are going to see to the bottom of this and get through everything all Russia-related. I didn't watch the hearing because I've been actually busy doing my job, but I've had briefings from Comey. I don't think we learned anything new here, and it only confirmed what we've been saying all along. But at the end of the day, we'll get to the bottom of all of this stuff, the questions you just raised with the Intelligence Committee investigation that's ongoing.
Last question, back to health care. Is the Freedom Caucus on board? Well, have you talked to them? Because Dave Bratt earlier today said 40 members were not going to vote for the bill, and Rand Paul said the same.
Yeah, well, I've spoken with many of them. I haven't spoken to every one of them. I talked to a lot of members. We've got 230-some members here. But the Freedom Caucus members that have had this vote in committee have already voted for it. One of the ones that didn't vote for it in the Budget Committee has now come out in favor of it since then. So we've had Freedom Caucus members already voting for it in committee, and one of them who didn't is now in favor of it because of the work requirements, because of the additional layers of federalism. So I've spoken with a lot of Freedom Caucus members who are voting for it. We also have the largest conservative caucus here, the Republican Study Committee. That's the biggest conservative caucus we have in Congress. Their leader and their key members came out in favor of it with President Trump in the Oval Office on Friday. And so we're making tremendous progress. We feel very good. And it's because we've been negotiating, listening to one another, improving this bill, making refinements to it so that we get to the sweet spot of a consensus bill that can pass. The key, it doesn't make any difference if you can't repeal and replace it if you can't pass it. So we're getting a bill that can pass, that repeals and replaces Obamacare. Okay. And this is just one piece of the three things we're going to do.
And you are confident that the bill in the Senate will be similar? You've been...
Yeah, the bill in the Senate will be similar, but we want them to improve it if they can. We think, because their rules are a little different once it gets over there. So if senators can make improvements to this bill without jeopardizing what we call the Byrd rule, meaning a filibuster, that's great. We want them to improve this bill if they can.
All right, Mr. Speaker, I know you're busy. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Sean.
And up next, live tonight, right here on Hannity.
Judge Neil Gorsuch's hearing is now underway in the Senate, and I urge members of both parties to swiftly approve his nomination.
Judge Neil Gorsuch's Supreme Court confirmation hearing, it started today. Up next, we get reaction from Jay Sekulow, Alan West. Also tonight, Larry Elder, Corey Lewandowski are here as we continue to go into James Comey testimony before the Intel Committee earlier today.
Judge Neil Gorsuch's hearing is now underway in the Senate, and I urge members of both parties to swiftly approve his nomination. He is an outstanding man from an outstanding family with an unbelievably wonderful wife. They should approve.
That was the president earlier tonight at his rally in Louisville, Kentucky, talking about Judge Neil Gorsuch. Joining us now with reaction from the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, Fox News contributor, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. You know, we use the term borking. We remember Clarence Thomas. High-tech lynching. This man is now going to be smeared, slandered, besmirched, his character assassinated by the same guys that supported him for the 10th Circuit.
Yeah, 10 years ago when he came up to be voted on, I think it was a voice vote, unanimous approval, 99-0. So what are they going to come up and say, we disapprove of you because of the last 10 years? They have to be very specific instead of these very nebulous things. And when you have the far left that are coming out and saying any of the Democrats that support him, we're going to primary you. Well, look, if they get in the way and become such judicial, obstacles and everything for this president to get this Supreme Court nominee through, guess what's going to happen to them in 2018? And furthermore, I don't want to hear anything else about the gentleman that President Obama nominated, because it was Joe Biden and also Chuck Schumer that said no president should be allowed to bring someone in their final year.
It's not good when it comes, your own rules come back to bite you. And speaking of which, Jay, maybe Joe Manchin, maybe Claire McCaskill's because she's scared to death about 2018, not because she wants to. I don't see the votes necessary to get over cloture, so I see a nuclear option, and he will be on the Supreme Court.
Well, I will tell you this, whether they have to utilize a nuclear option or not, I will tell you this without any question, that Judge Gorsuch will be Justice Gorsuch in about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even sooner than that. Look, this guy's got, I'm biased. We've had a case before him, and the case came out well, and came out well, by the way, at the Supreme Court, where based on his decision, we won the case 9-0. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for Judge Gorsuch. I'm looking forward to appearing before him when he's at the Supreme Court. Do I think that the Democrats are going to make this a party line situation? Yes. The rules are never this, the truth is, Republicans will give the benefit of the doubt, so to speak, to the president's
Jay,
nominees.
I'll say it a little more bluntly. Yep. Republicans are suckers. Seriously.
Yeah, well,
they are just never underestimate the ability of Republicans to cave, and they have no backbone. Let's be real here.
Yeah, no, I completely concur, and that's why you end up with every one of these Supreme Court fights become exactly that, a Supreme Court fight. It shouldn't be. This man is so eminently qualified that the American Bar Association, not exactly a conservative organization, gave him the highest rating.
Yeah. All right. Let me go back to our lead story from earlier tonight, and that is James Comey. And here we've all these months, Clapper, Comey, Admiral Rogers, all said no evidence at all. I mean, at what point do we say this is ridiculous?
Well, we should be saying that right now. And the thing is, what's so incredible to me is how the media said nothing when President Obama leaned over and said, after my reelection, I'll have more flexibility to Russian President Medvedev.
I got that tape. I'll play it.
Absolutely. They said nothing when Hillary Clinton was involved with the uranium deal with Russia. They continue to say nothing when,
Wait a minute. That uranium deal, remember, they made millions.
Yes.
While she was Secretary of State, he's given speeches in Moscow. Okay. And the uranium deal that results in 20% of American uranium in the hands of a Russian company, and Hillary personally approved it.
You're absolutely right. And you already brought up the issue of the Obama campaign operatives and the $300,000 from the State Department, our taxpayer money that went toward,
unseating
Bibi Netanyahu.
Yep.
So again, it's this hypocrisy alert that we see going on, and we need to have Republicans to stand up and say, time out on the court. No more of this. We're going to move on, and we're going to do the things that are necessary to implement the legislative agenda of this president.
Jay?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you this. There was a couple of takeaways that should be the top line of the media. It won't be. Number one, no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians per se. I mean, there was no evidence of that. Number two,
no impact on the election.
NSA, nothing. As far as any vote switching or interfering with an actual vote in any state. Number two. Number three, the thing that I am so concerned about is the Department of Justice, the FBI reports to the Department of Justice, part of the Department of Justice. The FBI director today, with not saying whether there's an investigation of the leaks, but saying that there's an investigation of Trump associates, this is a double standard that reaches a new level of hypocrisy.
Thank you.
And then couple that with, I'll tell you something else, Sean. We have to be concerned that the FBI has become this political. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, or Independent. In the United States of America, in a constitutional republic, not acceptable.
In one appearance, say, we don't comment on ongoing investigations. Comment on one, but not the other. And you're right. Clapper, Admiral Rogers, and James Comey today, they all stated the same thing. No impact on any votes in any of those states that mattered in this election. Or any
that
state.
should be the top line.
Yeah.
That should be the top line in this whole discussion. It won't be because of the media, but I'll tell you at the end of the day, and this is what we've got to look at here. We're a constitutional republic. It's the rule of law, and you cannot have the FBI
Is it
politicized.
time for Comey to go?
That creates a constitutional. Oh, I think so. Listen, he's created his own constitutional crisis,
real quick, I'm out of
and the
time.
country's
Time for him
having
to
to
go?
pay for that.
Yes, I think it's time for him to go. The most important thing is we cannot have the leaks of classified information to the New York Times.
He won't even
Washington
acknowledge
Post.
that he's investigating. We know that's a
Right.
felony. That is just like he never finished with Hillary and the server, and Hillary with the foundation. All right. Good to see you in studio, by the way.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you always being here.
We are going to drain the swamp of government corruption in Washington, D.C. And we are going to keep our promises, all of the promises that we made. We are going to massively reduce your taxes. We are going to reduce very substantially rising crime and support the incredible men and women of law enforcement.
That was the president earlier tonight at his rally in Louisville, Kentucky. Joining us now with reaction, former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski and Salem nationally syndicated radio talk show host Larry Elder. You know what I love Larry more than anything else about when the president goes on the road? A, he calls out fake news. B, he reiterates every promise he made during the campaign. He's not changing direction. He's not backing down. And And C, you can see the energy behind. He doesn't need these media people anymore. He's done with them. Who needs them?
Well, that's right. He has a convenient way of communicating with something like 40 million Americans through social media, whether it's Twitter or whether it's Facebook. Yeah, it's very, very impressive. I will, however, caution a lot of the Republicans out there when I hear this expression, drain the swamp. You see, Sean, the reason for the presence of the swamp creatures is the presence of the swamp. And the swamp is about government having its hands and fingers in everything. And so if you are, for example, involved in the healthcare industry and the government has decided that we're going to have a plan where everybody can get coverage, then you have a fiduciary obligation to try to interfere with the legislation so it helps you. So you have lobbyists from the pharmaceutical people, from the medical manufacturing people, Nurses Association, Hospital Association, Doctors Association, all of whom are going to lobby. That is what the swamp is all about. So if Donald Trump wants to drain the swamp, he has to reduce substantially the size of government and get government out of all the things it's involved in. And I don't see that plan.
Well, I saw in his budget, he was talking about significant cuts to, I mean, real cuts, not reductions and increases across the board, especially reducing the size, scope, and government. And Corey, add to that, getting rid of what? 75% of regulations that are on the books, destroying businesses and job creation.
Well, that's right, Sean. You also see that he's cutting the EPA dramatically, which is an agency that's been very punitive against a number of organizations, including many of our farmers. What this president has said is that he's going to put a premium on the defense industry and making sure that our military has all the resources they need to be successful. And look, this is a very different mindset from the previous administration. We're going to make sure that we're the greatest military power that the world has ever seen. We're going to make sure that our government is no longer punitive. We're going to make sure that those government agencies, which have been going after small businesses time and time again, have their budgets reduced so that we can make sure that the individuals who need the resources have those resources. And first and foremost, that's the Department of Homeland Security, the Veterans Administration, and the Department of Defense.
Yeah. And, you know, you talk about the swamp, Larry. All right, maybe the swamp at the State Department, we got to get there. The leaks in the intelligence community, which, again, felonies, and the FBI director can't acknowledge that felonies are committed and they need to be investigated. He'll talk about the Russia investigation, but he doesn't talk about ongoing investigations. Is he not looking into the leaks, which are ruining people's lives, and our intelligence community, members of this, running rogue here?
Yeah, well, it certainly didn't seem like the Democratic congresspersons were very interested in probing the leaks. They want to talk about Donald Trump's alleged collusion, even though, as you pointed out, a number of officials says there's no evidence of it. One other one is the acting CIA director under Barack Obama, Mike Morrell, who recently said that he hasn't seen any evidence whatsoever of collusion.
Oh, all right. Last word, quick, Corey. We got 20 seconds.
Sean, the deep state is very real. There are individuals who sit inside the federal government who want to make sure that this president is not successful. We've seen that with the leaking of his